She was given in marriage to an 80-year-old millionaire. But while being observed in a bikini by the pool, she encounters true and forbidden love, which makes her make a dangerous decision for love. You cannot miss the end of this story. Subscribe to the channel and comment from which city and country you are watching this video and come with us. The main hall of the mansion was impeccably decorated, but there was something in the atmosphere that made everything cold, impersonal. Crystal chandeliers hung from the very high ceiling, reflecting a golden light on the antique and polished furniture. The woody scent of the mahogany furniture mixed with the delicate aroma of the freshly arranged flowers in expensive porcelain vases. Everything there referred to a silent, almost suffocating opulence. Ava was sitting on one of the leather sofas, her hands resting on her lap, trembling. Her light blue dress, chosen by her mother for the occasion, seemed a cruel contrast against her restless expression. At 20 years old, her beauty was undeniable. Soft skin, long brown hair falling over her shoulders, and expressive eyes that were fixed at that moment on the figure in front of her. Benjamin was sitting in an imposing armchair, his expression neutral and his eyes half closed, analyzing the young woman. His wrinkled face and stiff posture betrayed the years weighing on him. The 80-year-old man did not mind hiding the superiority he felt at that moment. For him, that marriage was not a union out of love, nor for companionship. It was a calculated move, a checkmate in a chess game started decades ago. Ava's family did not know, but that marriage was not a generous offer. It was a crafted revenge. "Couldn't your mother come?" Benjamin asked, adjusting his glasses on his nose. "She is unwell," Ava replied, her voice almost a whisper. "I'm sorry to hear that," he said without any real emotion. The truth was that Benjamin felt no sorrow at all. At that moment, he saw before him the daughter of the man who had deceived him in the past. Decades earlier, Michael, Ava's father, made a fraudulent deal with him, leading Benjamin to lose a fortune. Since then, he had harbored a silent resentment, patiently waiting for the right moment to settle the score. Fate, however, had been generous with his patience. When he learned that Ava's family was on the brink of ruin, with overwhelming debts and a sick mother, he realized that the moment for his revenge had finally come. "Your father was a man of questionable decisions," Benjamin commented, crossing his fingers on his lap. Ava kept her gaze low. She knew her father was not perfect, but she had never fully understood the circumstances that led them to their current situation. She only knew that somehow that marriage represented the only viable way to prevent her mother from losing the house they lived in. "I promise you will be well treated," he continued. "You will have everything you need." But there was a tone in the way he spoke those words that made Ava shudder. The marriage took place a few days later, discreetly. Few guests, few words. At the altar, Ava felt her heart weigh down when Benjamin slid the ring onto her finger. The feeling that her life was being sold to a man who did not see her as a wife, but rather as a trophy, squeezed her chest. When they entered the mansion after the ceremony, Ava realized that this place would be her new prison. That same night, while Ava explored the silent mansion, she met William. He was in the office, organizing some medicine bottles on a table. His white uniform made it clear that he was part of the medical staff of the house. Tall, with dark hair and attentive eyes, he exuded a professional demeanor. Noticing Ava standing at the door, he paused what he was doing and flashed a polite smile. "Good evening," he said. Ava hesitated before responding. "Good evening. Are you Benjamin's doctor?" "Caretaker," he corrected, shrugging. "Besides managing the medications, I accompany his daily routine. My job is to ensure that he does not overdo it, that his health remains stable." Ava nodded, unsure of what to say. "If you need anything, I'm always around," William added, returning to organize the bottles. It was a brief encounter, but something in the way William spoke and looked at her lingered in her mind. Unlike Benjamin and the other staff, he seemed human. The following days were marked by a strict routine. Benjamin required Ava to be present for breakfast and dinner, maintaining the appearances of a traditional marriage. In public, he held her hand firmly, as if to make it clear that she belonged to him. But inside the mansion, the marriage was merely a formality. Ava slept alone in a room at the other end of the hallway, far from her husband's suite. She did her best to avoid any closer proximity to Benjamin, and he seemed to enjoy keeping that distance, as if he knew he had already won the war. Still, something strange lingered in the mansion. The staff was too discreet, as if they knew something Ava did not. Whispers quickly fell silent when she entered a room. Small, pitying glances were cast in her direction, but no one dared to say a single word. And then there was the night in the garden. Ava felt suffocated inside that house and decided to go out for some fresh air. The moon illuminated the garden with a pale glow, and it was there that she found William. He was sitting on a stone bench, looking up at the sky. When he noticed her presence, he smiled slightly. "Can't you sleep?" Ava shook her head and sat next to him. "It's beautiful here," she commented, looking around. "Yes," William paused before adding, "but beauty doesn't always mean freedom." She looked at him, surprised by the phrase. There was something in the way he said it that felt familiar, as if he, like her, was also trapped in some way. The wind blew gently, making Ava's hair dance in the air. For a moment the two remained silent, simply enjoying the tranquility of the night. But the peace did not last long. Benjamin's voice echoed from the mansion, harsh and impatient. "Ava." She jumped. "I better go," she said, rising. William simply nodded, watching her retreat. But before she disappeared through the door, he murmured something softly, which almost got lost in the wind. "Be careful." And at that moment, Ava realized that perhaps William knew something she still did not. Ava's white dress fluttered gently in the morning breeze. She stood before the altar, feeling the weight of the fabric against her body, but nothing was as oppressive as the feeling of being trapped in a destiny she did not choose. The small church hall was silent, filled with a few guests, all watching, with curious eyes and whispering among themselves. The voices felt like invisible stings on her skin. "She is so young. What will her life be like now? What is that girl doing?" Ava tried not to listen. She tried to focus on her breathing, on the slow rhythm of her own heart, which pulsed not from love, but from the fear of the unknown. Benjamin, beside her, maintained an impassive expression. Dressed in a pristine suit, he was far from the typical radiant groom. There was no emotion in his gaze, only cold and calculating satisfaction. To him, this was not a wedding. It was a settling of scores. When the priest announced the moment for the vows, Ava swallowed hard. She felt her mother's gaze upon her, fragile and ill, sitting in the front row. She knew that if she hesitated, if she withdrew, her mother would lose everything. So with a choked voice, she murmured, "Yes, I accept." The ring slid onto her finger like a golden shackle, binding her forever to the man who did not love her, who did not even see her as a wife. When the ceremony was over, Benjamin held her hand firmly and guided her to the church exit. His touch was cold, dry, nothing like that of a passionate husband. "Don't worry, Ava," he murmured, not even looking at her. "You will learn to live by my rules." Those words were a warning. Benjamin's mansion was immense, more than Ava had imagined. The imposing building, with its classical columns and huge windows, exuded an almost intimidating luxury. As she crossed the threshold, she immediately realized that this was not a home, but a monument to power and opulence. The staff, all in impeccable uniforms, lined up discreetly to receive her. No smiles, no warm greetings, just downcast looks and calculated movements. "Welcome," Benjamin said, walking through the hall with slow steps. Ava observed her surroundings. The marble floor gleamed, reflecting the light from the grand chandeliers. Old paintings adorned the walls, depicting serious and stern ancestors. Everything was a constant reminder of the history and prestige of Benjamin's family. She did not know how she would fit into that setting. An elderly maid approached, maintaining a rigid posture. "Your room is ready, Mrs. Ava. May I accompany you there?" Benjamin, who had heard, let out a low laugh. "Her room? My wife sleeps with me." Ava felt a chill run down her spine. Her stomach twisted in an almost nauseating way. However, to her surprise, the maid hesitated, as if she already knew something Ava did not yet understand. It was then that Benjamin stepped back, smiling to the side. "I'm joking, my dear," he said, lightly touching Ava's chin. "We have time for everything." She forced a weak smile, but deep down, she felt an immediate sense of relief. When she finally reached her room, she closed the door behind her and took a deep breath. For the first time that day, she allowed herself to crumble a little. But the peace was short-lived. Later that night, Ava decided to leave her room to explore a bit more of the mansion. The hallways were long and silent, and each step she took echoed ominously. It was then that she spotted William. He was on the lower floor, organizing something on the office desk. The soft glow of the lamp highlighted the strong features of his face. There was something about him that conveyed seriousness, yet at the same time, a veiled kindness, something that violently contrasted with Benjamin's coldness. Before she could turn away, William looked up and saw her. "Lost?" he asked calmly. Ava hesitated before replying, "Just getting to know the house." He nodded and walked to the door, stopping near her. Ava noticed that he was looking at her differently, not like the other staff, who seemed afraid to speak to her. "If you need anything, you can call me," he said quietly, as if he didn't want anyone else to hear. She felt a slight shiver. In that moment, Ava realized that William was not just a servant. There was something more there, a story he had not yet told, and in some way she felt that he would be the only person she could trust in that house. The next morning, Benjamin was waiting for her for breakfast. He read the newspaper calmly, his glasses perched on the tip of his nose. When Ava approached, he looked up and gave a satisfied smile. "Did you sleep well?" She forced a nod. "Yes." He set the newspaper down and poured himself a cup of tea. "Tonight, we will have dinner with some important guests. I want you by my side, smiling and showing what it is to be an exemplary wife." The tone of his voice was a command, not a request. Ava nodded slowly, but something inside her began to churn. It was as if, little by little, she was disappearing into that new life, and she did not know how long she could bear it. William, on the other side of the room, watched in silence, and deep down, he also knew that something was about to change. The time inside the mansion passed strangely for Ava. The days dragged on in a suffocating silence, broken only by the sporadic sounds of the contained voices of the servants and the echo of Benjamin's footsteps in the hallways. The house, no matter how luxurious, seemed to carry an invisible weight, a story buried beneath the impeccable walls and the refined furniture. Since the marriage, Benjamin treated her with a cutting politeness. He made a point of displaying her like a trophy at social events and maintained an impeccable demeanor in front of others. But when they were alone, the indifference became suffocating. There were no affectionate touches, only veiled orders and subtle demands. Ava felt like a porcelain piece, placed there to please the eye, but without a voice, without her own will. The only presence in the house that did not look at her like a stranger was William. Benjamin's caretaker had a serene and observant demeanor, as if he were always attentive to everything without needing to say much. He truly saw her, and Ava noticed this in the small gestures, in the way he held the door open for her, in the manner he offered a glass of water before she asked, or in the understanding gaze when he saw her force a smile at the endless dinners. That afternoon, Ava wandered aimlessly through the mansion, trying to find some distraction. She passed through the huge living room and then through the hallway of portraits, where old paintings of Benjamin's family looked at her with severe expressions. Her own reflection in the glass of one of the frames seemed tired. "Have you lost yourself in your own house?" The deep, low voice of William made her turn. He was leaning against the doorframe of the office, arms crossed. Ava noticed he was wearing casual clothes at that moment, a white shirt rolled up at the sleeves and dark pants. He seemed different, less stiff than when he was in uniform. "I'm just exploring," she replied, shrugging. "There's not much to explore here. Everything in this house already has a defined place," he said, and Ava couldn't tell if that was just a comment or a warning. She approached a little, crossing her arms. "And you? What are you doing here, William?" He raised an eyebrow, surprised by the question. "I've been working for Benjamin for a few years," he replied without much detail. Ava sensed there was more there, something he wasn't telling. "But why? You don't seem like the other servants." He chuckled softly. What does that mean?" She hesitated. She didn't want to seem rude, but it was true. All the other staff in the house were extremely discreet, almost invisible. William, on the other hand, looked people in the eyes, spoke without fear, truly existed in that suffocating mansion. "Don't you fear him?" William glanced away for a brief moment, and Ava realized that the question had struck him in some way. When he looked back at her, his expression was more serious. "Fear? No," he said slowly. "But I'm not naive either. I know what Benjamin is capable of." Ava's heart raced. "What is he capable of?" William opened his mouth to answer, but before he could say anything, Benjamin's voice echoed down the hallway. "Ava!" She jumped and quickly turned. Benjamin was standing at the end of the hallway, leaning slightly on the cane he always carried with him. His gaze was sharp, calculating. William, without hesitating, took a step back, assuming the neutral posture he always had in Benjamin's presence. "What are you doing here?" the old man asked Ava, completely ignoring William. "Just getting to know the house better," she replied, forcing a smile. Benjamin narrowed his eyes and then cast a cold glance at William, as if assessing something. "Dinner will be served soon. Don't be late." It was only then that he turned his back and walked slowly down the hallway. Ava let out a relieved sigh and turned back to William, but he was already moving away too. She stood there for a moment, alone in the hallway, feeling a strange knot tighten in her throat. Dinner that night was a formal affair, as always. Benjamin demanded that Ava sit by his side and behave impeccably, like the perfect wife he wanted to show off. He spoke of business, influences, the people he should respect and those he should ignore. "You need to understand, my dear," said Benjamin, lightly swirling the wine glass between his fingers. "The world operates through alliances. It's important that you learn to maintain appearances." Ava merely nodded, not wanting to argue. What Benjamin didn't know was that inside her, something was beginning to rebel. In the following days, Ava began to observe more, to listen more, and with every detail she noticed, the feeling grew that Benjamin was hiding something much greater than his obsession with control. She found papers in the office that mentioned old business. Stifled conversations among the servants made her suspect that secrets ran through the corridors of that house, and more, William seemed to know something he wasn't saying. Then, One night, while walking through the garden to get some fresh air, she encountered William again. He was sitting on the same stone bench looking up at the sky. But this time, when she approached, he did not greet her with a smile. "You should be careful," he said bluntly. Ava frowned. "What do you mean by that?" He sighed, hesitating. "Benjamin didn't marry you just to save you. He has his own motives." Her heart raced. "What motives?" William turned his gaze toward the mansion in the distance, where one of the lights in Benjamin's office was still on. "You need to find that out for yourself," he replied finally. And at that moment, Ava was certain that her life inside that house was much more complicated than she had imagined. Time inside the mansion followed its own rhythm, slow, dragged out, almost unreal. Ava's days were filled with silent rules and an imposed routine, but the real weight of that house went beyond the suffocating luxury or the constant presence of Benjamin. Something in that environment seemed hidden, concealed behind the immaculate walls, the contained whispers of the servants, and the evasive glances that avoided meeting hers for too long. Ava felt like a ghost. Benjamin demanded her presence, but not her company. He displayed her like a trophy at dinners and discreet gatherings, held her hand at social events, and in public maintained the appearance of the devoted husband. But within the mansion, among the corridors and sumptuous rooms, Ava was merely an ornament. The absence of affection did not surprise her, but Benjamin's growing coldness unsettled her. If at first he seemed satisfied with the conquest of marriage, now it felt like his gaze was always evaluating, always waiting. But waiting for what? The setting sun cast a golden light through the windows as Ava walked to the library. She had spent the day in a state of unease, seeking something to distract her mind. Since the last conversation with William in the garden, a constant sense of alert had not abandoned her. He knew something, and he refused to tell. As she ran her fingers over the books on the shelves, she heard footsteps behind her. She turned quickly and found William standing at the door, watching her. "You always appear when I'm trying to think," she said, crossing her arms. "Maybe you think better when you have company," he replied, leaning against the doorframe. Ava stared at him for a moment. Since she arrived at that house, William was the only person who did not treat her like she was made of glass. She hesitated before speaking. "You're not going to tell me what you know about Benjamin, are you?" William looked at her for a moment before responding, "I can't." "Why not?" He sighed and looked away for a brief moment. "Because some truths are more dangerous than they seem." Ava felt a chill run down her spine. She knew this was not just a marriage of convenience. There was something more, something that Benjamin was plotting, and she needed to find out what it was. That night, sitting next to Benjamin at the dinner table, Ava felt the weight of his presence like never before. He spoke slowly, between sips of wine, and his eyes analyzed her as if trying to measure something invisible within her. "You have been adapting well to life in the mansion," he said, not breaking eye contact. Ava forced a small smile. "Yes, I have been trying." Benjamin tilted his head slightly. "And has William been helpful to you?" Ava's heart skipped a beat. She maintained her composure, gripping her cutlery tightly. "He is a good employee." "She," replied, her voice neutral. The silence that followed seemed to last an eternity. Then Benjamin smiled. "Great. He knows his place." The words were calm, but there was something in them, a hidden weight, an unspoken warning. Ava knew in that moment that Benjamin was watchful, and that any closeness between her and William would not go unnoticed. The following days were a game of shadows. Ava tried to keep up appearances, but inside her something was stirring. She was beginning to understand that Benjamin did not want her as a wife. He wanted her as a piece in a larger game, a game whose rules were still unclear to her. And in the meantime, the tension between her and William grew with every exchange. Look, every stolen moment of silence. One afternoon, while crossing the hallway towards the garden, Ava heard footsteps behind her. When she turned, she found William there, too close. "You need to be more careful," he murmured. "Careful with what?" she whispered back. His eyes were intense. "With him. I already know that." "No," William shook his head. "You don't know." For a moment, neither of them moved. The silence between them was charged with something they both felt but couldn't name. Then, as if realizing they were too close, William stepped back. "Stay alert, Ava," he said, before disappearing down the hallway. She stood there, feeling her heart race, her breath shallow. Something was happening, something that went far beyond a loveless marriage or a controlling husband, and Ava would not rest until she discovered the truth. The night was warm and silent. The mansion, shrouded in darkness, looked even more imposing under the silver light of the moon. Ava felt the weight of that house upon her, as if each wall, each antique piece of furniture carried a secret whispered for decades. She couldn't sleep. Dinner that night had been more suffocating than the previous ones. Benjamin was attentive, studying her, and Ava knew that any slip could be noticed. Ever since William had warned her to be careful, a knot of distrust had been growing. Inside her, Ava needed air. Slowly, she opened the door to her room and walked through the hallways in silence. She passed by the huge windows of the main hall, where the moon entered timidly, and proceeded to the door that led to the garden. The cool night air enveloped her skin as soon as she stepped outside. She closed her eyes for a moment, inhaling deeply. It was the first moment of freedom she had felt in a long time, but she was not alone. Sitting on a stone bench in the shade of a tree was William. He held a small notebook in his hands, flipping through some pages without much interest. He wore a white shirt with the first buttons undone and the sleeves rolled up, revealing strong forearms. When he noticed Ava there, he raised his gaze and smiled slightly. "Did you lose your sleep?" Ava walked slowly up to him, crossing her arms to try to hide the involuntary shiver she felt at the sight of him. "I can't sleep in this house," she admitted, looking around. William closed the notebook and leaned back on the bench. "I understand." She hesitated for a moment before asking, "What are you doing out here?" He smiled sideways. "I like the silence. It's the only time of day when I can forget that this house exists." Ava felt a tightness in her chest. Those words seemed to reflect exactly what she felt. She sat down beside him, maintaining a safe distance. "You're not like the other employees," she commented, glancing at him sideways. William let out a low laugh. "You've said that before, and I still find it strange." He sighed, looking at the sky for a moment as if pondering whether or not to say something. "I didn't want to be here," he confessed, finally. "But sometimes life pushes us into places we don't choose." Ava held her breath. "Does it force you to stay?" William looked away but didn't answer immediately. "Let's just say I have reasons to stay." That wasn't an answer, but it was enough for Ava to realize that he was trapped there, just like her. For a few minutes, the silence between the two was comfortable. The wind blew gently, rustling the leaves of the trees around. Ava closed her eyes and for a moment pretended she wasn't in the mansion, that it was just any night, that she was free. "Do you miss anything?" William suddenly asked. Ava opened her eyes and looked at him. "What do you mean? Who you were before all of this, before Benjamin?" She felt a lump in her throat. "I miss not being afraid of the future," she said, her voice low. William nodded, understanding. "I do too." Ava's eyes met his. It was the first time someone inside that house seemed to truly understand her, and in that moment she knew she was not as alone as she thought. But before she could say anything, a sound cut through the tranquility of the night. Benjamin's voice echoed through the house, harsh and impatient. "Ava!" she jolted, feeling her heart race. William tensed beside her. "You better go," he said softly. Ava quickly stood up, but before she took a step, William grasped her wrist. The touch was light, but firm enough to make her look at him. "Be careful," he murmured. She swallowed hard, feeling the intensity of that moment. Then, without saying anything else, she stepped back and walked back inside the mansion. As she crossed the hallway, she felt Benjamin's gaze even before she saw him. He was standing at the top of the stairs, gripping his cane tightly. "Where have you been?" he asked coldly. Ava tried to remain calm. "Just getting some air in the garden." Benjamin's eyes narrowed slightly. "Alone?" She hesitated for a second, but shook her head. "Yes." He continued to stare at her as if searching for any sign of a lie on her face. Then he smiled slightly. "Go to sleep. Tomorrow will be an important day." Ava felt a shiver with those words. He knew. Maybe he didn't know about the meeting with William. Maybe he didn't have proof, but he knew that something was happening, and that made him even more dangerous. The day broke heavy with tension in the mansion. Ava noticed this as soon as she went down for breakfast. The servants were quieter than usual, moving with mechanical precision. It was as if the very air was dense, charged with an invisible foreboding. Benjamin was sitting at the table, as always. However, something about him seemed different that morning. His gestures were slower, his eyes darker. He did not look at her when she sat down. He just stirred his coffee slowly with a silver spoon. "I will travel for surgery today," he announced bluntly. Ava already knew this. Benjamin needed to be admitted to another city for a relatively simple surgical procedure, but one that would require a few days of recovery. He would take only a trusted aide, leaving the mansion under the care of a reduced team of servants. She kept her gaze fixed on the teacup in front of her, hoping he would continue. "You will stay here," he added, casting her a quick evaluating glance. Ava nodded, trying not to show any emotion. Inside, however, she felt flooded with a mix of relief and apprehension. For the first time since the marriage, she would be free from Benjamin's presence. "I don't want any trouble," he said, placing the spoon on the saucer with a subtle but threatening sound. "I want you to behave as my wife should behave." She nodded again, unable to trust her own voice. Benjamin watched her for a few more seconds, then got up. "I will be back soon." Those were his last words before leaving. Ava remained at the table for a few minutes after he left, slowly absorbing what that meant. For the first time, the mansion would be hers, at least for a few days. When Benjamin's car disappeared through the gate, Ava felt a weight lift off her shoulders. She took a deep breath, feeling a rare moment of freedom. She decided to enjoy that morning for herself. She put on a tiny bikini, one of the few she had brought with her, and walked to the pool in the back of the mansion. The blue water sparkled under the hot sun. The garden surrounding it, always impeccably well kept, looked even more beautiful without Benjamin's oppressive presence. She entered the pool slowly, feeling the pleasant temperature envelop her skin. For the first time in a long time, Ava felt alive. William did not intend to see her, at least not that way. He was crossing the garden, heading towards the house, when he saw her in the pool. Ava looked like an untouched vision. The water trickled down her sun-kissed skin. Her long, damp hair fell over her shoulders, and her eyes were closed, as if she were enjoying a rare moment of peace. William tried to look away, tried to ignore the sudden wave of heat that coursed through his body, but he failed miserably. Ava then opened her eyes. She saw him, and instead of hiding or looking away, she smiled. "What's wrong?" she asked, resting her arms on the edge of the pool. William cleared his throat, feeling his face heat up. "I didn't expect to see you here." She tilted her head to the side, studying him with a curious glint in her eyes. "You can come in if you want." He laughed, shaking his head. "I don't think that would be appropriate." "Because Benjamin wouldn't approve." William fell silent for a moment. Ava moved away from the edge a bit and gently dove in, crossing the pool with slow movements. When she resurfaced, a short distance from him, she smiled again. "I don't think he needs to know." William felt his heart race. The tension between them had grown in the past few days, and now it was there, on the surface, in furtive glances and silences charged with something forbidden. He knew he should leave, but he didn't. The hesitation lasted only a few seconds. William took off his shirt and entered the pool. The cold water contrasted with the heat burning under his skin. Ava watched each of his movements, her playful smile giving way to something more intense. "I thought you wouldn't accept," she murmured. "You're terrible at disguising your intentions," he replied, moving slowly closer. Ava's heart was racing. She knew this was wrong. She knew Benjamin wouldn't hesitate to destroy them if he found out. But at that moment, she didn't care. When William got close enough, she raised her hand and gently touched his face. He closed his eyes for an instant, breathing deeply. "Ava," he murmured, but she didn't let him finish. She kissed him. The touch of their lips was hesitant at first, as if both were testing the limits of that madness. But in seconds, the hesitation disappeared, giving way to a desire that had been contained for too long. William held her waist, pulling her closer, and Ava finally felt free. In that instant, nothing else existed but the two of them, the mansion, Benjamin, the danger that surrounded them. All vanished. Everything was reduced to the heat of the kiss, the sliding of wet hands, the muffled sound of breathless gasps. And on that day, between the blue of the pool and the forbidden desire, Ava finally lived. The kiss between Ava and William was like a spark in the midst of gunpowder. Everything they had held back over the past few days erupted all at once, as if time had saved every forbidden glance, every unspoken word, every suffocated desire. The pool water seemed warmer than before. The wet bodies fitted together naturally, as if they were destined for each other. The touch of William's hands on Ava's waist made her burn inside, as if she were finally alive, as if this were the first time she felt something genuine since she was forced to marry. "Ava," he murmured between kisses, his lips tracing a wet path on her skin. She gasped as she felt his strong hands slide down her bare back. She closed her eyes, allowing herself to be carried away by that moment that she knew shouldn't be happening, but that she couldn't stop. William lifted her slightly in the water, pressing her against the edge of the pool. Her heart hammered hard against her chest, a mix of adrenaline and desire taking over her body. "Tell me this is right," he asked, looking her in the eyes. Ava took a deep breath. "I don't know what is right," she confessed, intertwining her wet fingers in his hair. "I just know it's the only thing that makes me feel something real." William didn't wait any longer. He kissed her again, this time without hesitation, without barriers, without fear. His hands slid over her wet skin, holding her with desire and reverence, as if she were something precious. Ava felt safe there, in that moment, enveloped by him. There was no Benjamin. There was no danger. There were no consequences. There was only William, and he wanted her as much as she wanted him. The water around them seemed to dance with the movements of their intertwined bodies. The warm afternoon air mingled with the heat between them, and the sound of water splashing with every movement of the two was like a whisper of something inevitable. Ava slid her fingers over William's chest, feeling the muscles beneath the warm, wet skin. Their bodies were so close that she could feel every beat of his heart, quick and intense, mirroring her own. "If we continue," William murmured against her lips, his breath coming in gasps. "I don't want to stop," she interrupted, looking into his eyes. There was truth in her voice. She didn't want to stop, and they didn't stop. In that moment, Ava completely surrendered, forgetting everything, ignoring all consequences. Forbidden love finally culminated there, in the blue water of the pool, under the open sky, and away from Benjamin's eyes. When night fell, Ava, still, felt her body light, as if she were floating. Lying on the lounge chair by the pool, she gazed at the starry sky while William was by her side, in silence. Reality gradually returned to her. What had they done? The shiver that ran through her. Skin was no longer of desire, but of alarm. "That was madness," she murmured finally. William turned his face to look at her. "If it was the best madness of my life." She laughed, shaking her head. "You know we can't continue with this." William sat slowly, resting, his elbows on his knees. "I know," he replied, but his voice lacked conviction. Ava knew there was no turning back. And worse, she knew Benjamin would find out. He always found out. Taking a deep breath, she stood up, hugging herself. "I need to go." William stood beside her. "Ava." She closed her eyes. "If Benjamin knows, he might end you." He caressed her face gently. "And you? What do you think he will do to you?" She swallowed hard. She had no answer. She just turned and walked into the mansion. But deep down, she knew that was only the beginning of real danger, allies in truth. The following morning arrived bearing an invisible weight upon Ava's shoulders. She woke in her bed feeling the residual warmth of the previous night still embedded in her skin, as if William was still there, touching her, holding her, kissing her. But as soon as she opened her eyes and stared at the high ceiling of her room, reality hit her like a rock. What they had done was dangerous. Benjamin might be out, but his shadow still loomed over the mansion. The man had eyes everywhere. Ava knew nothing escaped his control for long. Still, as she dressed and combed her hair, she realized she felt no regret. She felt fear, yes, anxiety, but not regret. What had happened between her and William was real. It was the only genuine moment she had experienced since she was forced into that marriage. But how long could she hide that? Ava spent the morning avoiding the employees' gazes. Every step she took through the mansion seemed calculated, as if she feared someone could see through her skin and discover what she had done. She didn't see William until after lunch. He was in the office, organizing some papers on the desk. When Ava entered, he looked up and, for a brief second, a small smile threatened to appear on his lips, but it disappeared quickly. They were in dangerous territory now. She closed the door behind her, crossing her arms. "We need to talk." William set aside the papers and sighed. "I know." Ava looked at the documents spread across the desk. Some appeared old, yellowed with time. "What is this?" He hesitated before answering. "I spent the night searching. These are old business records of Benjamin. There's something here that doesn't make sense." Ava approached, picking up one of the papers. It was an old contract dated many years ago, signed by her father and Benjamin. Her heart raced. "My father was involved in business with him?" "Yes," William confirmed, watching her closely. "And not just ordinary business. Something here suggests that your father not only harmed Benjamin financially, but also knew of something dirty that he was doing." Ava felt a chill run down her spine. "What do you mean by that?" William turned to her, leaning on the desk. "The real reason why Benjamin married you wasn't just revenge. He wants something only you can give him." The air seemed to vanish from the room. Ava took a step back, feeling dizzy. "But what?" William took a deep breath, grabbing another document. I haven't figured it all out yet, but there are mentions of missing money. An absurd amount that belonged to Benjamin, but that disappeared years ago, around the same time your father was involved with him. Ava brought her hand to her mouth. Are you saying that my father stole from Benjamin? Or knew who stole it, William corrected, and Benjamin wants that answer. Ava felt her body tremble. Now everything made sense. The marriage was not just revenge, it was a game. Benjamin was waiting for the right moment to press her, to make her reveal something even she didn't know. She closed her eyes, trying to contain the panic that began to grow within her. I don't know anything, she whispered. William placed his hands on her shoulders. But he thinks you do. Ava opened her eyes and met his. There was genuine concern in them. You need to get out of here, he said, his voice firmer now. She swallowed hard. If I run away, he'll know I discovered something. This could make everything worse. William hesitated. He knew she was right. The only way out now was to uncover the whole truth before Benjamin returned. And quickly. That afternoon, Ava rummaged through all the files in Benjamin's office, every drawer, every folder, trying to find something that could clarify the story. William helped, staying alert for any sound that came from the corridor. It was then that Ava found a letter. The paper was yellowed, folded, and forgotten inside an old book. She opened it and began to read. Her eyes scanned the words quickly, and with each line, shock grew inside her. The letter was from her father, and it was addressed to Benjamin. I know what you did. I know where that money came from, and I know that if this is revealed, you will lose everything. Don't think you can trick me. If anything happens to me, the documents proving all this will be in safe hands. You can't silence me. Ava felt a shiver run down her spine. Her father knew something dirty about Benjamin, something big, and now Benjamin thought she knew it too. She looked at William, her breath quickening. This is bigger than we imagined. William took the letter, reading it quickly. His eyes hardened. Your father tried to protect himself. But something went wrong. Ava felt her chest tighten. He died in a car accident. William looked at her. What if it wasn't an accident? The silence that followed was chilling. Because for the first time, Ava was certain she was married to a man capable of anything, even murder. The letter Ava held trembled in her hands. The weight of those words felt like a bomb about to explode inside her chest. Her father not only knew Horacio's secrets, but also threatened him. And now, more than ever, it made sense that his death hadn't been an accident. William took the letter from her hands and quickly reread it, his eyes darkening. This explains a lot, he murmured, but it also puts us in real danger. Ava felt a shiver run down her spine. If Horacio knows we found this, he will want to get rid of you, William finished, his jaw clenched. She closed her eyes for a moment, trying to control the wave of panic threatening to overtake her, but fear would not paralyze her. Not anymore. She opened her eyes and found William's. We need to act before he returns. William nodded. You're right, but we need to be careful. Horacio has contacts, influence. If we do this the wrong way, he can silence us before we even manage to prove anything. Ava clenched her fists. So what do we do? He took a deep breath, thoughtful. Let's gather more evidence. If your father mentioned documents kept in a safe place, we need to find them. This could be our only chance to expose him. That night, while the mansion was engulfed in silence, Ava and William rummaged through Horacio's office, searching for any clue that would lead them to the documents mentioned in the letter. Every drawer, every shelf, every book was meticulously searched. It was then that Ava found something. Behind a picture on the wall there was a hidden safe. Her heart raced. Here, she whispered, calling William. He quickly approached and examined the safe. We need a combination. Ava tried to contain her frustration. She looked around, searching for any clue that could indicate the password. Then she remembered the letter. She took the paper again and analyzed each line. That's when a detail caught her attention. The date at the end of the letter was not just a common signature. It was a code. "Try this sequence," she said, indicating the numbers to William. He slowly entered the numbers on the safe's panel, and for a moment, nothing happened. Then, a soft click sounded in the air. The safe door opened. Inside, there was a bundle of aged papers, a flash drive, and a voice recorder. Ava picked up the papers with trembling hands and began to flip through them. What she saw made her blood run cold. They were records of fraudulent bank transfers, contracts signed with fake names, proof of bribes paid to influential politicians and businessmen. Horacio was not just a vengeful businessman, he was a criminal. William grabbed the recorder and pressed the play button. The voice of a man filled the room. "If something happens to me, this needs to be disclosed. Horacio built his fortune on lies and crimes. He thinks he can get rid of anyone, but the truth always finds a way to come to light." It was Ava's father's voice. She felt a knot tighten in her throat. Her father knew he was in danger. And now, she was too. "This is enough to put him in prison," William said, his eyes fixed on the documents. Ava took a deep breath, gathering courage. "We need to hand this over to the authorities." "Yes," William agreed. "But we have to. Be quick. If Horacio finds out we took these documents..." He didn't need to finish the sentence. Ava already knew. The decision was made. The next morning, William discreetly left the mansion and went to a reliable contact to deliver the evidence to the authorities. Meanwhile, Ava remained calm, behaving normally, so as not to raise suspicion. But then, something happened. A few hours after William left, one of the employees came to Ava with a pale face. "You need to know." The boss came back early. Her heart stopped for a second. "What?" "He just arrived. He said the surgery was a success and decided to come. Back ahead of schedule." Ava felt the air leave her. Horacio was back and William had not yet returned. She ran to her room and took her father's letter, hiding it inside her bra. If Horacio suspected anything, he couldn't find any evidence. Minutes later, she heard heavy footsteps in the hallway. The bedroom door opened without warning, and Horacio entered. His gaze was cold, assessing. "You look surprised to see me," he said, shutting the door behind him. Ava took a deep breath, forcing a smile. "I didn't expect you back so soon. How was the surgery?" He studied her for a moment, then smiled slightly. "Perfect. And while I was away, how did you behave?" Ava felt a shiver. Something in his tone indicated he already suspected something. "Everything went well," she replied, trying to stay calm. Horacio took a few slow steps towards her. "Are you sure about that?" Her stomach turned. He knew. Maybe he didn't know everything, but he knew something was wrong. And she needed to stay calm until William returned. If he returned, the air inside the room felt heavier than ever. Benjamin stood before Ava, his cold eyes analyzing every detail of her expression. He never needed to raise his voice to intimidate. His presence was enough to make her feel trapped. Ava forced a smile, keeping her hands tightly intertwined so that he wouldn't notice she was trembling. "Of course I am sure," she replied, trying to sound nonchalant. "Why wouldn't I be?" Benjamin slightly tilted his head, a cynical smile forming on his thin lips. I don't know. Maybe because I know very well the people who inhabit this house. I know when they hide something." Ava's heart raced. He was playing with her, testing her. She couldn't give in. "What do you think I'm hiding?" she asked, challenging him with her gaze. Benjamin chuckled softly, taking a step forward. "We'll still find out." He raised his hand, and for a second, Ava thought he was going to touch her. But instead, he simply adjusted the collar of his own suit, as if he were adjusting the threads of an invisible web he believed he controlled. "I have a gift for you," he said, abruptly changing the subject. Ava blinked, confused. "A gift? Yes, it's waiting in the main room." She hesitated but knew she had no choice but to obey. Benjamin followed her down the hallway, walking slowly behind her like a predator analyzing its prey. When Ava entered the room, she felt her body freeze. William was there, but not in the way she expected. 2 of Benjamin's guards were by his side, holding his arms firmly. His face bore marks of struggle, a cut bleeding on his brow, and his shirt was rumpled and stained. Ava stifled a scream. "What is happening?" she asked, turning to Benjamin. The man walked slowly to the sofa and sat down, crossing his legs calmly. "I should be asking you this, Ava. My faithful caretaker was caught trying to deliver some very interesting documents to the authorities." He looked directly at William. What a disappointment. Ava felt bile rise in her throat. You knew?" Benjamin smiled. "My dear, nothing happens in this house without my knowledge. I just let you play your own game to see how far you would go." Her stomach churned. He had let them play their game, knowing that in the end he would pull the rug out from under them. She looked at William, who, even injured, held a firm gaze. "It's okay, Ava," he murmured, but it wasn't. Benjamin stood up and walked slowly toward Ava, stopping close enough for her to smell the woodsy scent of his cologne. "What irritates me," he began in a low voice, "is not just the betrayal. I was expecting that." He raised his hand and slid a finger across Ava's face, causing her to shiver, but she did not flinch. "What irritates me is the fact that you actually believe you could defeat me." She felt a chill run down her spine. "What are you going to do?" she whispered. Benjamin turned to his guards. "Take him away." "No!" Ava instinctively lunged toward William, but Benjamin held her arm tightly, preventing her from moving. William struggled against the guards, but he was at a disadvantage. "Ava, listen," he said, trying to break free. "The documents are already in the right hands. No matter what he does, the truth will come out." Benjamin froze for a moment, and then, for the first time, the mask of perfect control cracked. He slowly turned to William, his eyes flashing with hatred. "What did you say?" William smiled despite the blood trickling from his wound. "You have already lost." The silence in the room was suffocating. Then suddenly the sound of sirens cut through the air. Ava's eyes widened. The mansion was surrounded. The door was kicked in and armed police officers entered, pointing their guns at Benjamin's guards. "Let him go!" shouted one of the agents. The guards had no choice. William was released and Ava ran to him, holding his face between her hands. "You did it," she whispered, feeling her eyes fill with tears. William held her hand. "We did it." Benjamin, for his part, stood still, motionless. His face showed no panic, just coldness. One of the police officers approached. "Benjamin, you are under arrest for fraud, corruption, and involvement in homicide." He calmly adjusted his blazer and cast a final glance at Ava. "Don't think this is over," he murmured. And then, without resistance, he was taken away. The silence that followed was strange. After so long living under Benjamin's control, freedom felt surreal. Ava looked at William, and in that moment, she knew she was finally free, not just from the mansion, but from a fate she never chose. The imprisonment of Benjamin was an event that shook the entire city. The businessman, who had maintained an impeccable reputation for decades, was now making headlines as the mastermind behind corruption schemes, fraud, and possibly even murders. His empire, built on lies and manipulation, was crumbling before everyone's eyes. Ava watched the news in silence, sitting next to William. They were at a friend's house, a safe place, where they could stay until everything was completely resolved. "It still feels surreal," she murmured, hugging her knees. William held her hand and squeezed it gently. "I know, but it's over, Ava. He can no longer control you." She looked at him, absorbing those words. It's over. But deep down, something still troubled her. Benjamin was a powerful man, even behind bars. He still had allies and influence. Something inside her told her that he wouldn't accept defeat so easily. And she was right. 2 days later, a call changed everything. Ava answered the phone, expecting to hear the voice of one of the lawyers handling Benjamin's asset division, but on the other end of the line, the voice that echoed was his. "Hello, my dear." A chill ran down Ava's spine. She looked at William, who immediately sensed that something was wrong. "How did you manage to call?" she asked, feeling her throat tighten. Benjamin chuckled softly. "I still have a few loyal friends. Did you really believe I would rot in prison without doing anything?" Ava felt her anger rise within her. "You lost, Benjamin. Your crimes have been exposed. There's no escape now. Is that so?" His voice was smooth, as if he were enjoying himself. "You know, Ava, that money buys many things. Influence, silence, even freedom." She felt a knot tighten in her throat. "What do you want from me?" There was a pause before Benjamin answered. "I always said that you owed me something, didn't?" Her heart raced. "I have nothing to give you." "Oh, but you do," he replied calmly. "Your life." A shiver ran down Ava's spine. "Are you threatening me?" "I'm just reminding you that this game isn't over yet," he said. "And I always play to win." The call ended. Ava dropped the phone on the table, her body trembling. "What did he say?" William asked, concern etched on his face. She looked him in the eyes. "He's going to try to get revenge." The following days were lived under constant alert. Justice had frozen Benjamin's accounts and placed him under maximum surveillance. But Ava knew that a man like him would always find a way to escape. And then, a week later, the news came. Benjamin had vanished. Prison guards reported that a group of armed men stormed the place and freed him. The police were on high alert, but no one knew where he had gone. Ava felt a chill run down her spine. He would come for her. That night, she and William decided they could wait no longer. They needed to flee. Together, they set off to a distant city where no one knew them. Ava used the assets she managed to recover from the marriage to buy a simple house, away from the spotlight and the constant threat of Benjamin. But even so, she never stopped looking over her shoulder. He was out there, and she knew he would show up one day. And he did. It was a rainy night. Ava was at home, reading a book in the living room, when she heard a strange noise outside. Her body went into immediate alert. William was in the bedroom, and she didn't want to call him just yet. She got up slowly and walked to the window. That's when she saw him, a silhouette standing in the rain near the garden bushes. Ava's heart raced. Benjamin. Fear froze her body for a moment, but then something inside her changed. She wouldn't run anymore. She went to the bedroom and grabbed the gun that William kept stored for safety. When she returned to the living room, she found Benjamin already inside the house. He was there, standing soaked from the rain, but still exuding the same arrogance as ever. "I knew I'd find you," he said, smirking. Ava raised the gun. "Don't take another step." Benjamin laughed. "You don't have the guts." She swallowed hard. "I had the courage to take you down. I would have the courage again." He took another step. Ava squeezed the trigger. The sound of the gunshot filled the house. Benjamin fell to the floor, clutching his shoulder where blood was already soaking. His shirt. "Damn it!" he hissed, pressing on the wound. It was then that William appeared, holding another gun, his eyes filled with fury. "It's over, Benjamin." He looked at the two of them, his face twisted with hatred. "This never ends." But at that moment, police sirens blared outside. They had found him. Benjamin was captured again, this time without any more allies to help him. This time, never to get out again. Months later, Ava and William were standing before the sea, feeling the wind hit their faces. "Free finally," she said, taking a deep breath. William held her hand. "Now we can really start." She smiled, feeling for the first time that she had a future. Without fear, without chains, without Benjamin. Just her, William, and the life they would choose to live together. And so, Ava finally found the freedom she had long sought. After facing a loveless marriage, a cruel revenge, and dangers that nearly cost her life, she was finally able to start over with the one she truly loved. Her story shows us that life is full of twists and turns, but there is always a path to happiness, even in the most difficult moments. Now we want to know, what would you do in Ava's place? Would you have the courage to challenge someone as powerful as Benjamin? Leave your comment and share your opinion.